Hey everyone. When we look at history, we tend to bring in our own biases, beliefs, and interests. We want to know where our own society comes from, and as a result, we tend to focus on certain areas we like better. So for those of us in the West, and by that I mean Europe and the Americas, we see Greece as the place where so much of our own culture really got going. So today's lesson, we're going to go ahead and take a look at Greece and all of the important stuff that they contributed to our culture. A lot of that stuff happened to happen during the Golden Age. So just to remind you, a Golden Age is a period when things are good, life is stable, and people aren't dying in wars or from famines. When life is good, people come up with great ideas and new inventions and beautiful artwork. The last time we looked at a Golden Age, we were looking at Gupta India, a time of peace and stability when Gupta scholars came up with lots of beautiful art and architectures and lots of new ideas, especially the number system that we use today and that whole concept of zero. The Golden Age in Greece, or more specifically the Palace of Athens, is going to contribute even more to who we are today. It happened during a period of peace between two wars, the Persian Wars, in which Greece was able to keep the Persian Empire from taking over, and the Peloponnesian War, which didn't go so well. The dates are 480 to 404 BC. It would be a great century for Athens. Let's take a closer look at what happened during that time. As you may remember from the last lesson, Athens had established a direct democracy in which the male citizens each contributed to the governing of the city. This was a new idea that was developed by the Greeks. The word democracy comes from the Greek words demos and kratos, which means basically rule by the people. And it's a very different idea than the monarchies and the empires that had been ruling most of the ancient world. Athenian democracy is the basis for our own democracy in the United States. The champion of Athenian democracy is a man named Pericles. He was a politician in Athens during the Golden Age and was such a popular leader, public speaker, and military general that this period of time is often called the Age of Pericles. Pericles helped to strengthen Athenian democracy by making it easier for citizens who didn't have much money to participate in government. This allowed for a more direct democracy. We talked about democracy before, so let's talk about direct democracy. This is when the people actually debate and create the laws themselves. In the United States, we do not have a direct democracy. We actually elect people to do all this work for us. In Athens, any man who was a citizen could participate in the government directly. Pericles helped set up this system so more citizens could participate. Okay, so we have democracy in Athens, which is perhaps their greatest contribution to our society today. Let's tell the story, though, about how Athens was able to establish this golden age of theirs. Remember from last time, the Persians tried to take over Greek city-states. So if you saw the movie 300, that was about 300 Spartan soldiers who tried to stop this huge Persian army from getting deep into Greece. Those men died trying to defend Greece, but the Persians didn't win that war. The Greek city-states worked together to defeat Persia. So after the Persian Wars, Athens got other city-states together to form an alliance called the Delian League. Athens told them, hey, since we all work so well together, let's strengthen our military and our defenses. The fancy way of saying that is called mutual defense, when nations agree to help each other out. So Athens asks the other city-states to send them a bunch of money, and they would make sure that those defenses got done. Pericles used that money to build up the Athenian navy, and then used that navy to kind of overpower the other city-states. And they more or less took over those city-states as part of an Athenian empire. It wasn't quite the way it was supposed to go. So basically, once the rest of the Delian League was forced to hand over all their money, Pericles used it to buy stuff to build not so much defenses, but fabulous buildings and artworks for the Palace of Athens. And no, that was definitely not part of the deal. So as a result of Athens' little bullying job there, we have some of the most beautiful art and architecture in history. the most famous of which is called the Parthenon. It was a massive religious temple for the goddess Athena, whom Athens was named for. It was gorgeous, built with marble and filled with statues of ivory and gold, including this one of the goddess Athena. It no longer exists, but it stood in the middle of the temple, 30 feet high, which is as tall as a 3-story building. Greek art is known for its realism and its love of the human body. They valued athletes and often sculpted bodies in perfect proportion. But the art form that's probably most significant to us today is drama, which was invented by the Greeks. And by drama, I don't mean the stuff going on in your life. I mean the theater. It was the Greeks who first began performing plays, both comedies and tragedies. These plays were paid for by the people like a tax, and performances were these huge events. At least for the men. Women in Athens didn't go to plays, and in fact were rarely out in the public at all. So Greek theater, though, is the basis for all of the movies and television comedies and dramas that we watch today. Although they're not performed live in a theater, movies and TVs are scripted and performed much in the same way as plays. And the idea to perform that way came to us from Greece. Two of the best-known playwrights of the period were Sophocles and Aristophanes. Sophocles wrote dramas such as Oedipus the King and Antigone. Oedipus is very famous. It's about a king who sort of accidentally kills his father and then sort of accidentally marries his mother. The play is about him finding out how all this unfolded and how it happened, and he pretty much loses his mind in the end. You would too, I'm thinking. Meanwhile, Aristophanes wrote comedies. Many Greek comedies are satires that made fun of politicians and other public officials. I personally love anything that makes fun of politicians. But my favorite play by Aristophanes is called Lysistrata, and it tells the story of a wife who's fed up with all the wars that the Greek city-states were fighting in. She gets all her girlfriends together, and they decide to withhold their wifely duties, if you know what I mean. So no scoodly pooping with their husbands until their husbands end the war. It's pretty funny, and needless to say, the women win in the end. Okay, so we talked about politics and theater, and the third great contribution of the Greeks is going to be philosophy. Like democracy, the word philosophy comes from the Greek language as well. Philo means love, and Sophia means wisdom. Philosophy, then, is all about thinking about ideas. Philosophers try to understand knowledge and truth and how the world works. The Greeks didn't invent philosophy. Confucius and Buddha and many others were trying to understand truth. But the Greeks approached it in a way that definitely affects how we think about things. Greek philosophers believed two things. One, that the universe was logical and orderly and followed a certain set of rules. And two, humans are smart enough to understand these rules and figure out how the universe works when they use logic and reason. This is more radical than you think. These philosophers are saying that we can think for ourselves, that maybe we don't need some powerful authority to tell us what's going on, that we can figure it out for ourselves if we know how to think. I mean, think about that. It's the reason why we educate everyone and not just the rich or privileged people. It's the reason we value individuals in our society, because anyone is capable of great ideas. The three great philosophers of ancient Greece, Socrates, his student Plato, and then his student Aristotle, all gave us a way to think about life, about the way we observe the world, and about the way we understand the universe and ourselves. Okay, yeah, these guys didn't invent the cell phone, but they have a greater impact on our lives than you think. They help us learn to think for ourselves. Alright, so let's close with another story. We talked about how the Athenians were able to kickstart their golden age with some talented people and the ability to more or less steal money from other city-states. Now let's talk about how all this ended. Can you guess how? If you thought war, yeah, you're right. Athens definitely wasn't the only Greek polis that was important. There were those other guys, the Spartans, who had one of the baddest military operations going. As you can imagine, the Spartans weren't going to sit back and let Athens have all the fun. Sparta set up an alliance of its own to compete with the Delian League. Both cities started proclaiming themselves greater than the other, and soon people in Athens and Sparta wanted a war just to prove that they were the best. So in 431 BC, the Peloponnesian War began between Athens and Sparta. I won't get into more details, but it was ugly, and many innocent civilians died of hunger and sickness because of the war. In the end, Sparta won, and the Golden Age of Athens came to an end. Athens' Golden Age gave us many gifts: politics, theater, arts, philosophy. The Greeks gave us advances in science and math, especially geometry, and so much of our culture can be traced back to Greek city-states. The end of Greek dominance, and indeed the end of the Persian Empire as well, happened at the hands of a student of the philosopher Aristotle. That student was a guy named Alexander, and his adventure will be the focus of our next lesson. See you then.